Passive English listening practice. Learning English is an important goal for many people today. English is used in education, business, travel, entertainment, and communication between people from different countries. However, learning English is not always easy. Many learners spend a lot of time studying grammar and vocabulary, but they still have problems when they listen to real English conversations. Native speakers often speak quickly, connect words together, and use expressions that learners do not know. Because of this, listening is one of the most difficult skills for many English learners. One useful way to improve listening is passive English listening. Passive listening means listening to English without giving all of your attention to it. You can listen to English while walking, cooking, cleaning, exercising, traveling, or doing other simple activities. You do not need to understand every word. The main purpose is to increase your contact with English and become more familiar with the sounds, rhythm, pronunciation, and common expressions of the language. Passive listening cannot replace active study, but it can be a useful part of an English learning routine. If learners use it correctly and regularly, it can help them become more comfortable with English and improve their listening ability over time. 1. What is passive English listening? Passive English listening is the activity of hearing English without focusing completely on the content. In active listening, a learner usually sits down and pays close attention to the recording. They may stop the audio, look at the transcript, check new words, and listen to difficult sentences several times. Passive listening is different. The learner allows English to play in the background while doing another activity. For example, a student can listen to an English podcast while going to university. They may not understand every sentence, but they can still hear English pronunciation and common expressions. Another learner may listen to an English audiobook while cleaning their room. Someone else may listen to English conversations while exercising. The important idea is that passive listening gives learners more contact with English. Imagine that two students study English for the same amount of time. Student A only studies English during a 1-hour lesson every day. Student B studies for 1 hour, but also listens to English for another hour while traveling or exercising. Student B has more opportunities to hear English. Of course, more listening time does not automatically mean better English. The quality of the listening is also important. However, regular exposure can help learners become more familiar with the language. 2. Why is listening difficult? Many English learners can read English better than they can understand spoken English. They may know many words when they see them on a page, but they cannot recognize those words when native speakers say them. There are several reasons for this problem. First, English pronunciation is different from spelling. A word may not sound exactly as a learner expects. Second, native speakers often speak quickly. Third, words can be connected together. This makes individual words difficult to recognize. Fourth, native speakers use short forms and common expressions in everyday conversation. For example, a learner may understand the sentence, "What are you going to do?" when reading it slowly. However, in natural speech, the sentence can sound much faster and more connected. A learner who has mostly studied English from textbooks may feel surprised when hearing real conversations. This is why regular listening is important. The brain needs time to become familiar with natural English. 3. The main goal of passive listening. The main goal of passive listening is not to understand every word. Instead, it is to increase exposure to English. When learners hear English regularly, they become more familiar with its sound. English may gradually feel less strange. They may begin to recognize common words and phrases more quickly. For example, a beginner may hear the phrase, "How are you doing?" and think it is difficult. After hearing it many times, the phrase becomes familiar. Later, the learner may recognize it immediately without translating every word. This is an important part of listening development. Passive listening can help create this familiarity because it gives learners many chances to hear the same language patterns. 4. Passive listening is not the same as active listening. Although passive listening is useful, it is not the same as active listening. Active listening requires concentration. The learner tries to understand the message and notice important language. For example, if you listen to a 5-minute English conversation actively, you may stop several times. You may check new vocabulary and listen to difficult parts again. Passive listening does not require this level of attention. You may understand only the general idea, or sometimes you may understand almost nothing. Both types of listening have different purposes. Active listening helps you develop strong listening skills. Passive listening increases your total exposure to English. A good learner should use both. 5. The benefits of passive listening. Passive listening has several possible benefits. Becoming familiar with English sounds. The more often learners hear English, the more familiar the sounds become. Learning common expressions. Repeated exposure can help learners notice phrases such as, I don't know, let me see, it depends, and what do you mean? Improving pronunciation awareness. Learners can hear how native speakers pronounce words and connect them together. Increasing listening time. Passive listening allows learners to hear English when they are not doing formal study. Building a habit. It can become part of daily life and make English practice more regular. These benefits may seem small at first, but they can become important after several months of consistent practice. 6. Passive listening and vocabulary. Vocabulary is very important for listening. If you do not know enough words, it is difficult to understand conversations. Passive listening can help learners meet the same vocabulary many times. For example, suppose a learner studies the word comfortable. At first, they learn its meaning. Later, they hear it in a podcast. Then they hear it in a video. After hearing it many times, the word becomes easier to recognize. However, learners should not depend only on passive listening to learn vocabulary. It is better to actively study important words and then meet them again through listening. This combination can make vocabulary easier to remember. 7. Learning words in context. One advantage of listening is that learners can hear words in real situations. For example, instead of only memorizing decision equals quitden, a learner may hear, I need to make a decision before tomorrow. This helps them understand how the word is used. Learning words in context is useful because English words can have different meanings depending on the situation. Passive listening gives learners many opportunities to hear words naturally. 8. The importance of repetition. Repetition is one of the most important parts of language learning. If you hear something only once, you may forget it quickly. If you hear it many times, it becomes more familiar. For example, imagine listening to the same 10-minute English story 5 times. The first time, you may understand only the main idea. The second time, you recognize more words. The third time, you understand some expressions. The fourth time, you can follow most of the story. The fifth time, many sentences feel easy. This is why learners should not always look for new content. Sometimes, listening to familiar content again is more useful than listening to something completely new. 9. Choosing the right level. One of the biggest mistakes in passive listening is choosing content that is too difficult. A beginner may listen to a fast English news program and understand almost nothing. After 10 minutes, they may feel tired and frustrated. It is better to choose content that is suitable for the learner's level. For A1 and A2 learners, simple conversations and slow English stories are good choices. For B1 learners, Learners can use simple podcasts, daily conversations, short news, interviews, and audiobooks. For B2 and C1 learners, they can listen to normal podcasts, movies, documentaries, lectures, and discussions. The content should become more difficult gradually. 10. Listening to interesting topics. Learners should choose topics they enjoy. If you like football, listen to English football content. If you like technology, listen to technology podcasts. If you like anime, listen to English discussions about anime. If you like books, listen to English book reviews. Interest makes learning easier because you naturally want to understand the content. You do not always feel like you are studying. This can help you continue for a long time. Number 11. Passive listening in daily life. One of the best things about passive listening is that it can fit into daily activities. For example, you can listen to English while taking a walk, cooking, cleaning, exercising, traveling, waiting for someone, doing simple housework. These activities do not require all of your attention. Therefore, you can use some of this time to hear English. This does not mean you should listen all day. It simply means that English can become part of your daily environment. 12. Listening while traveling. Travel time is a good opportunity for passive listening. For example, if you spend 30 minutes going to school every day, you can listen to an English podcast during the journey. 30 minutes per day becomes about 3.5 hours per week. Over 1 year, this can become a large amount of listening time. The learner may not understand everything, but they receive regular exposure. This is especially useful for learners who feel that they do not have enough time to study English. Number 13. Listening while exercising. Exercise is another good time for passive listening. You can listen to English while walking, running, or doing simple exercises. However, the content should be easy enough to follow without too much concentration. Short conversations and podcasts are often good choices. If the learner is doing difficult exercise, they may not be able to pay attention to English. That is fine. The main purpose is simply to create additional exposure. 14. Listening while cleaning. Cleaning is also a useful time. For example, you can play an English audiobook while cleaning your room. You may not understand every sentence, but you can hear English for 30 minutes or more. This can make English a normal part of your everyday environment. The important thing is not to feel pressure. Passive listening should be relaxed. 15. The role of English podcasts. Podcasts are one of the best sources for passive listening. There are podcasts for almost every topic and level. Learners can choose podcasts about daily life, education, travel, sports, technology, stories, news, personal development, entertainment. For B1 learners, it is better to choose podcasts with clear speech and familiar topics. At first, learners may need to use transcripts. After becoming more comfortable, they can listen without transcripts. 16. Audiobooks. Audiobooks are also useful. They provide longer stories and repeated vocabulary. For learners who enjoy reading, audiobooks can be especially effective. A good method is to read the book and listen to the audiobook at the same time. This helps connect written English with spoken English. After reading the story, learners can listen again without looking at the text. This can gradually improve listening ability. 17. English videos. Videos can also be used for passive listening. YouTube has a huge amount of English content. Learners can watch videos about topics they enjoy. However, they should avoid depending completely on Vietnamese subtitles. If possible, use English subtitles first. For example, watch a video once with English subtitles. Then watch it again without subtitles. This can help the brain connect spoken English with meaning. Number 18. Listening without understanding everything. One important lesson is that learners do not need to understand every word. When listening passively, it is normal to miss some information. Imagine listening to a 5-minute conversation and understanding 70% of it. That is already useful. You can still understand the general meaning. Over time, repeated exposure may help you understand more. Trying to understand every word can make passive listening stressful. Therefore, learners should focus on the general message. 19. Passive listening and pronunciation. Listening regularly can help learners become more familiar with English pronunciation. They can notice how words sound in real conversations. For example, native speakers often connect words together. A sentence that looks long when written may sound like one continuous stream when spoken. Learners need to hear these patterns many times before they become comfortable. Passive listening can provide additional exposure to these patterns. However, listening alone does not improve pronunciation completely. Learners also need to practice speaking. 20. Shadowing as a complement. Shadowing is an excellent activity to combine with passive listening. In shadowing, you listen to a speaker and repeat their words immediately. For example, "I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea." The learner tries to copy the pronunciation, speed, and rhythm. Passive listening helps learners hear English. Shadowing helps them produce English. Together, they can be very useful. 21. Active recall. Another useful method is active recall. After listening to a short recording, stop it and try to remember what you heard. Ask yourself, what was the main idea? What words did I hear? What happened in the story? This forces your brain to retrieve information. Active recall is stronger than simply hearing the same information again. Therefore, learners should combine passive exposure with active recall. 22. Passive listening and memory. Memory plays an important role in language learning. When we first hear a word, we may forget it quickly. Repeated exposure can make the memory stronger. For example, if you hear the phrase, "it depends," every day, you may eventually recognize it immediately. This is one reason passive listening can be useful. It provides repeated contact with language. However, important vocabulary should still be reviewed actively. Using flashcards or other memory methods can help. 23. Using flashcards. With listening, learners can combine listening with flashcards. For example, suppose you learn 10 new words today. You study their meanings and example sentences. Then, you listen to a podcast that contains some of those words. When you hear them, they become easier to remember. This creates a connection between vocabulary study and listening. The more different situations in which you meet a word, the stronger your understanding can become. 24. Listening before sleep. Listening to English before sleep can be useful. For example, you can spend 15 minutes reviewing vocabulary and then listen to a short English story. This may help you relax while also giving you additional exposure. More importantly, studying before sleep may allow the information to be consolidated during the night. However, this is different from learning English while asleep. The learner is still doing the actual learning while awake. Sleep mainly provides rest and supports memory. 25. Listening during sleep. Some people play English audio throughout the night. The idea is that the brain might continue learning while the person sleeps. Although the brain can respond to sounds during sleep, this should not be considered a replacement for active learning. There is no good reason to expect someone to become fluent simply by playing English audio while sleeping. If a learner wants to try it, they should use familiar and calm audio at a low volume. Most importantly, it should not disturb sleep. 26. Sleep quality comes first. Sleep is extremely important for learning. If you listen to English all night but sleep badly, you may feel tired the next day. Poor sleep can make it harder to concentrate, remember vocabulary, and understand English. Therefore, learners should never sacrifice sleep for passive listening. If audio makes you sleep worse, turn it off. A healthy and well-rested brain is more useful for learning than several extra hours of background audio. 27. Passive listening cannot replace speaking. Listening is important, but speaking is also necessary. A learner can listen to English for many hours and still have difficulty speaking. Speaking requires practice. You need to retrieve words quickly, build sentences, pronounce them, and respond to other people. Therefore, learners should spend some time speaking every day. Even 5 or 10 minutes can be useful. You can describe your day, talk about your hobbies, or summarize something you listen to. 28. Passive listening cannot replace writing. Writing is another separate skill. Listening can help you learn vocabulary and grammar, but writing requires you to organize ideas and produce accurate sentences. Learners should therefore write regularly. For example, they can write a short diary entry every evening. They can describe what they did that day or explain their opinion about a topic. This helps turn passive knowledge into active language ability. 29. Reading and listening together. Reading and listening can work very well together. A learner can read a short English article while listening to its audio version. This helps connect spelling and pronunciation. It can also make difficult words easier to recognize. For example, you may know the written word comfortable, but not recognize it when a native speaker says it. Reading and listening together can help solve this problem. 30. Creating an English environment. Passive listening works best when it is part of a larger English environment. You can watch English videos, read English articles, listen to English podcasts, and use English websites. You can also change some device settings to English. The goal is to make English a normal part of daily life. When learners meet English regularly, they may feel less afraid of it. They may also become more confident when listening to native speakers. Number 31. Avoiding difficult content. Learners should not choose difficult content simply because it is made for native speakers. If you understand almost nothing, you may become frustrated. For example, a B1 learner may find a fast political debate extremely difficult. A simple interview about travel may be much better. The goal is to challenge yourself, but not make the material impossible. A good rule is to choose content that is understandable enough to keep you interested. Number 32. The importance of consistency. Consistency is more important than listening for many hours once a week. 30 minutes every day is often better than 4 hours once a week. Daily exposure gives the brain regular contact with English. It also creates a habit. After some time, listening to English becomes normal. You no longer need to force yourself to do it. 33. A simple daily plan. A learner can follow a simple routine. Morning, review 10 words. During travel, listen to an English podcast. Afternoon, listen to a short English video. Evening, do 20 minutes of active listening. Before bed, review important phrases. This routine does not require many extra hours. The learner simply uses small periods of free time. 34. A weekly plan. A weekly routine can also help. On Monday, choose a podcast. On Tuesday, listen to the same episode again. On Wednesday, read the transcript. On Thursday, study new vocabulary. On Friday, listen again without the transcript. On Saturday, practice speaking using the new vocabulary. On Sunday, review everything. This creates repetition and active practice. Number 35. Measuring progress. Learners should measure progress by their ability, not by listening hours. Ask yourself, can I understand more than last month? Can I recognize words faster? Can I understand normal speech? Can I summarize what I heard? Can I speak using new vocabulary? These questions are more useful than asking how many hours of audio you played. Number 36. Common mistakes. There are several common mistakes in passive listening. First, listening to content that is too difficult. Second, changing content too often. Third, listening without ever reviewing vocabulary. Fourth, believing that passive listening can replace active study. Fifth, sacrificing sleep. Sixth, listening for many hours but never practicing speaking. Avoiding these mistakes can make passive listening much more useful. 37. Passive listening for B1 learners. For B1 learners, passive listening can be especially useful. At this level, learners already know basic grammar and common vocabulary. They can understand simple conversations, but may have problems with natural speech. They should choose content that is slightly above their current level. For example, a B1 learner can listen to a podcast and understand about 60 to 80% of it. The remaining information can gradually become easier through repetition. 38. Moving from B1 to B2. To move from B1 to B2, learners need to increase both vocabulary and listening ability. They should gradually listen to longer and more natural content. They can move from learner podcasts to podcasts made for native speakers. They can also watch interviews and documentaries. However, they should not move too quickly. It is better to understand most of a simple podcast than almost nothing from a difficult one. 39. Making passive listening enjoyable. Passive listening should not always feel like studying. Choose content that you genuinely enjoy. If you like stories, listen to stories. If you like sports, listen to sports podcasts. If you like games, watch gaming videos. If you enjoy the content, you are more likely to continue. Long-term consistency is more important than a perfect study method. 40. The psychological benefit. Passive listening can also change the learner's attitude toward English. At first, English may feel difficult and strange. After hearing it every day for several months, it may become more familiar. The learner may feel less nervous when watching English videos or talking to foreigners. This increased confidence is valuable. Learning a language is not only about vocabulary and grammar, it is also about becoming comfortable using the language. 41. Passive listening during free time. Many people think they do not have enough time to learn English. However, they may have many small periods of free time. 10 minutes while waiting, 20 minutes while traveling, 30 minutes while exercising, 30 minutes while cleaning. These periods can become useful English exposure. Passive listening allows learners to use these moments without creating a completely new study schedule. 42. The difference between hearing and processing. It is important to remember that hearing English does not always mean processing English. You can have a podcast playing in the background while thinking about something completely different. In that situation, you may not learn much. This is why passive listening should not be the only method. Sometimes you need to stop and concentrate. A short period of active listening can be more valuable than a long period of background noise. 43. Finding the right balance. The best approach is balance. You can spend some time actively studying and some time passively listening. For example, you might spend 30 minutes on focused listening and another 30 minutes listening while traveling. The first 30 minutes build skills. The second 30 minutes increase exposure. Both are useful. 44. The long-term effect. Passive listening may not produce dramatic results in 1 week. The benefits are usually gradual. After 1 month, you may simply feel more comfortable hearing English. After 3 months, you may recognize common expressions faster. After 6 months, you may notice that some native speakers are easier to understand. After 1 year of regular practice, your overall listening ability may be significantly better. The key is consistency. Number 45. Do not expect a shortcut. Learning English takes time. There is no method that can completely remove the need for practice. Passive listening is useful because it makes practice easier to fit into daily life. It is not useful because it allows you to learn without effort. This difference is important. A learner should think, I will use passive listening to increase my exposure. not I do not need to study because I can listen passively. 46. A good learning formula. A balanced English learning system can be summarized as learn, listen, repeat, speak, review, sleep. First, learn new vocabulary and grammar. Second, hear them in real English. Third, repeat the material. Fourth, use the new language in speaking. Fifth, review it later. Finally, get enough sleep. This process is much more effective than relying on one method. 47. The role of patience. Learners sometimes become disappointed because they cannot see immediate improvement. This is normal. Language learning is a long process. You may hear thousands of English sentences before you can understand native speech easily. Every listening session adds a small amount of experience. Do not worry if you cannot understand everything. Keep practicing. 48. A practical example. Imagine a university student who wants to improve English. Every morning, the student reviews 10 vocabulary cards. During the journey to university, they listen to an English podcast. In the afternoon, they watch a short English video. At night, they spend 30 minutes actively listening to the same podcast. They check the transcript and practice difficult sentences. Before sleeping, they review the new vocabulary. This student is using both active and passive learning. After several months, they may notice that English conversations are becoming easier. 49. How to use passive listening correctly. To use passive listening effectively, remember 5 basic rules. First, choose content that is suitable for your level. Second, listen regularly. Third, repeat useful content. Fourth, combine passive listening with active study. Fifth, protect your sleep and health. These simple rules can prevent many problems. 50. Final thoughts. Passive English listening is a simple method that can help learners increase their exposure to English. It is especially useful for people who have limited time because they can listen while doing other activities. However, passive listening should not be treated as a magic solution. Hearing English is not the same as understanding and using English. Learners still need active listening, vocabulary study, speaking, reading, and writing. The best way to use passive listening is to make it a small part of your daily routine. Listen to English while traveling, walking, exercising, cleaning, or relaxing. Choose interesting content that is suitable for your level. Repeat the same podcasts, stories, or conversations instead of always searching for something new. If you want to listen before sleeping, you can review English first and then listen to familiar, calm audio. If you decide to play English while sleeping, make sure the volume is comfortable and, most importantly, make sure it does not disturb your sleep. In the end, successful English learning is not about finding one perfect method. It is about creating good habits and following them for a long time. Passive listening can increase your contact with English, while active practice turns that exposure into real skills. The most important thing is to keep listening, keep practicing, and keep improving little by little. After months and years of regular practice, English can gradually become a natural part of your everyday life.